You drop a scoop of white powder into a glass of water, swirl it around, and drink it. You introduce the molecule to your body, but you haven't necessarily introduced it to your muscles. Many people maintain this routine for months without seeing the strength or volume changes typically shown in the scientific literature. This often happens because we assume absorption is a passive process, that the powder simply drifts from the bloodstream into the tissue. In reality, moving creatine across a cell membrane requires a high-energy transport system. Of course, it is important to consult a healthcare provider before starting any new supplement routine. If your cellular conditions don't support that transport system, the molecules stay in your bloodstream until they are cleared as waste, regardless of the brand or the consistency of your dose. Decades before these powders existed, athletes in the 1960s were already achieving these cellular saturation levels through their diet. Their primary sources were whole foods like herring, beef, and cottage cheese. These foods provided high concentrations of creatine, but they also delivered the specific proteins and minerals that the body uses to regulate its movement into the cells. When we moved to an isolated powder in plain water, we removed the secondary nutrients that naturally signal the muscle tissue to begin the absorption process. To enter the muscle, creatine passes through the SLC6A8 transporter. This co-transporter relies on a sodium gradient, pulling sodium and creatine in simultaneously. Taking creatine with water alone creates a weak gradient. The pump slows down, trapping molecules outside. Without the electrochemical force of that sodium gradient, the creatine is unable to cross the membrane. It remains in the bloodstream until it is eventually filtered out by the kidneys. Hydration levels also dictate how effectively these transporters work. If you take your dose while dehydrated, like immediately after a high-intensity workout, you change the osmotic pressure on your cells. This stress activates a protein called AMPK. This acts as a signal to prioritize metabolic survival, which slows down energy-intensive processes like the active transport of nutrients into the muscle. To reverse this, the body requires a storage signal, which is triggered when you consume carbohydrates and your body releases insulin. Insulin increases the activity of the sodium-potassium pump, which strengthens the gradient the SLC6A8 transporter needs to function. Studies show that pairing creatine with carbohydrates can increase muscle retention by 20 to 30%. Restoring fluid levels and triggering that insulin response transitions the cell into a state where active transport can happen at full capacity. Grounding the process in biology helps clarify common concerns. For example, there is no verified clinical evidence linking creatine use to hair loss. It also changes how we view the loading phase, where users take 20 grams a day to see results faster. This graph shows that while a loading phase saturates the muscles quicker, taking more than 5 grams at once increases the metabolic load on the kidneys. A steady maintenance dose of 3 to 5 grams reaches the same saturation level safely over time. These myths often stem from side effects caused by improper dosing or poor hydration, rather than a problem with the molecule itself. The most effective way to utilize this research is to stick with creatine monohydrate, the form used in the vast majority of clinical studies. You can check the link in the description for the brand I use. Look for a third-party testing seal to ensure the purity matches the label. For the best results, ensure you are fully hydrated, include a small amount of sodium, and take your dose with a carbohydrate-containing meal after your workout. How do you currently take your dose? Let me know in the comments if you've been taking it on an empty stomach or with a meal. Maximizing the impact of the supplement depends on creating the cellular conditions necessary for your muscle tissue to actually store it.